Okay. There's still a few people wondering in, but I think it's time we got things underway. Just like I say, good evening to you all. It's fabulous to see you all here. My name's Adrian Peach. I'm going to be comparing tonight for you, just introducing who's coming up onto the stage. So, the Redcliffe Hotel, I personally think, is a little jewel of Paignton, isn't it? Aren't we lucky? So I just want to take this moment as we're all sat here to look out there. Just have a look, just look to your left and just say, aren't we lucky? That is gorgeous out there, isn't it? And we are so lucky in this bay. And there's only one other person in this room that I know that loves this bay as much as I do. And I'll introduce him in a minute. So tonight, I'm going to introduce in a short while that man himself, Mr. Gordon Scott, who is our Reform UK parliamentary candidate for TORBAY. We have a gentleman called Dave Ellis, who is going to be talking about UK defence in a short while. That's going to be good. There's only one other person. You all know who that is, because that's why you're here tonight to listen to the wonderful Andy. A little bit of kind of background, really, as to why I'm stood here now, if you'd like to know. Just a little story, but like a bit of a story. About 10 weeks ago, a friend of mine said, hey, Joey, are you gonna vote for the general election? Because it was starting to warm up, wasn't it, in the press? And I said, no, don't think so. He said, what do you mean? I said, I think what I'm going to do is, as a protest vote, I'm just going to spoil my ballot. Because they always read out the pros and cons and then the spoiled ballots, don't they? And I thought, that's my protest. And this friend said, look, why don't you come down to my boat, because I've got this chap called Gordon Scott, who's the Reform candidate for TORBAY, coming down to just talk to a few of us. Okay, so I thought, well, why not? I've got nothing to lose, and have a cup of tea. So I walked onto the boat, and there was 4 of us on there, of which Gordon was one. There was Nick. There was 2 others, and so we had this little conversation. It was lovely, and had a bit of one-to-one time with Gordon. And Gordon explained about himself, his history, and his politics, and also the Reform Party, which I'd never heard of. So that was lovely. Carried on. And Nick said, we're going to do it again next week. We're going to continue doing these Thursday night meetings, just for people to come down and have a little chat on his boat. Okay, so that's nice. So next week I went down there and done a little bit of research on reform, much. I could spell it. And then the next week there were 9 people on the boat. So there's 9 of us, and we were all having a conversation. I'm listening to Gordon and the way he's handling the conversations with the other 8 people, and I found it really good, really engaging. So the next week, did it again, 16 people on the boat. Now by this time, the boat's getting a little bit busy. So it's not that big a boat, and there's 16 of us on there. So we kind of finished the evening off and said goodbye to everyone. And I stood up and I said to Gordon, do you think we should do something a bit bigger next week? Maybe we, because I'm a member of the Yacht Club in Torquay, and I said, maybe we do something next Friday at the Yacht Club in Torquay. So I don't know if any of you guys were there. Any of you the Yacht Club? Yeah, you're good. Well, I thought, okay, let's do something in the Yacht Club. We put it up on Eventbrite. We all put it up on our own personal social medias and stuff. And it was less than a week later, we were at the Yacht Club. And I thought, it'd be nice, maybe 30, 40 people. Be good, be good. It'd be a nice evening, quite intimate. It's quite a big room we were in, but it would be a really nice evening. Anyway, so we opened the doors, and lo and behold, over 100 people, bang, straight into the Yacht Club. We were like, whoa, what? Yeah, this is great. So that caught us out a little bit. But we had a great night. We had a really, really nice night. Gordon came across really well, and everyone really, really enjoyed it. So we moved on from there. And obviously at that point, the general election hadn't been called. So we kind of grew a little group of volunteers who, probably some of the volunteers are here tonight, but they're the people that if you've had a ticket through your door or a banner put up outside or something, then these are the volunteers that probably have come and done that, because we are a group of volunteers that help out for this sort of stuff. So these meetings we've been having on a Tuesday night, just in a little room here at the Redcliffe Hotel, been really enjoyable. First week, 20 people. Second week, 25 people. Third week, 40 people. Fifth week, maybe, I think that was last week, the fifth week we've been doing it. So we had this meeting, and there was about 45 people there, and we all like-minded, all people that want reform to do well, all people that believe in Gordon. So at the end of the meeting, Gordon says, I heard a text out. She says, Anne Widdecombe's offered to come down and have a little chat with us. There's a little bit of a motivator for the team, if you like. And so we're sat in the room, which is just a little back room over there. It's not very big. And I said, well, why don't we try and do it in the ballroom? Yeah, okay, let's try and do the ballroom. So we had a little chip around within our little volunteers, because that's the way it rolls here, because Gordon has to pay for everything, and also the volunteers have to volunteer some money to make things happen for reform, because we haven't got big money like the big parties have. So you guys in here today is a real pleasure. So our volunteers all chipped in some money. Gordon made the phone call in the morning. Can we have the ballroom? Yes, you can. Hired it out. This is where we are now. So going forward from there, I thought to myself, right, it's going to be a lovely evening, and it is a beautiful evening, as you can imagine. About Thursday came, Friday, I think it was Thursday or Friday. I'm laying in bed, and I had this cold sweat moment. And it's like, oh my God, hang on, what have we done? What have we done? We're going to be down here, and we're in the ballroom, and we're going to have Anne Widdecombe up on the stage, and there's going to be 30 people at the front. And I thought, so honestly, I had a bit of a cold moment there. So I rang Gordon in the morning, and I said, Gordon, how are we doing on the event price? 214. Wow. Come on, that's a movement, isn't it? Yeah. You think that's good? We're over 300 tonight. Yeah. Come on, you guys a round of applause. Because if you want change, you've got to vote for change. And change is you guys. Okay? And I don't know if you noticed that every chair that has had a little leaflet put on it here, what I want you to do with that leaflet, if you've got one at home, do you want to give it to a friend? And go and give another one to another friend. And let's get Gordon elected. Yeah? So, okay, without further ado, let's just move forward now. I'm going to introduce you to the man himself. Please put your hands together for the amazing Gordon Scott. Thank you, Adrian. Amazing.
So, who wants their country back? Yeah. Well, this is the start. It starts here. As Adrian said, we have a movement. It has grown. He has told us how it has grown. It has grown organically in this bay. Everyone here, they picked up snippets from other people. They've heard about it through the grapevine, maybe an email, maybe talking to someone else. We have spread the word. We have fantastic volunteers like Adrian who have done that hard work. And it is through their kind donations that we are standing here tonight. So please give them a round of applause. This is the start of something. We've heard it from the National Party, but we're now hearing it from the local candidates. We've actually been out there on the streets for the last year, and we do sense something. There is a feeling here, not just in this bay, but across the country. People are fed up with their government not doing what they're meant to be doing. And I just want to focus on this bit for a minute. We have public servants. We have public servants that are politicians, and we have public servants that are the civil service. Both are meant to serve us. We are in the situation that we are because they're not serving us. We have an opportunity in 2.5 weeks to set that straight. General election, we must vote for the change that everyone needs. But how do we get our public servants to serve us once more? It is actually quite a difficult thing to describe. but they are duty bound to do it. We very often hear left-wingers maybe saying, or talking about, or globalists talking about the rule of law. But I think they misunderstand what the rule of law is. The rule of law means that the law rules. They have forgotten that because they think they're above the law. And they think they can tell you what the law is and you have to abide by it. But that's not the rule of law, that's tyranny. And we've lived under that increasingly over the last 25 years. It began in 97 with a Blair government, and we've had now 14 years of a Conservative government, and they've failed to change a single thing of it. This is why we're in the situation that we're in. There is a great apathy in this country, a great feeling of helplessness, because no matter who you vote for, you're getting the same thing, and you're not getting what you vote for. No manifesto pledge is kept. And so it's natural for people around the place to think to themselves, oh, well, what's the point of voting? But now we have an opportunity for change because we have a party offering that change. And we are not the same as them. We are not career politicians. I am an investment manager. Colleagues across the country come from all different walks of life, but one thing they have in common, they are not the same career politicians who have got us into this mess, and we are all determined to get us out of it. So this little gathering here tonight, as we've heard, it's grown, it's organic. It is becoming a movement that our leader has called a revolt. And I think that's apt, because that revolt is against those self-serving politicians and self-serving public servants who haven't been doing their job, haven't been serving the people. So it's right that the people vote against them now to change. You cannot get that change by voting Liberal Democrat, by voting Labour, by voting Conservative. They are the different side of the same coin. They'll all do the same thing that make you apathetic to different degrees. Now the Conservatives are possibly the least worst of them. Imagine a Liberal Democrat government or a Labour government. Similarly as useless. So right now, I want you to all come together with me, and I want you to get on board with this movement and push for that change that we need. Now, we have some very distinguished guests this evening. The first one of them, however, not many of you have heard about. He is coming here tonight because the government continues to do things which aren't in the best interest of the people, as I have described. Our politicians have become salesmen for the government's plans. They are no longer representatives for the people. So they continue in the back rooms to make deals and make plans that are against our best interests. Now, our defence industry is one of those things where this is happening. And we have Dave Ellis here today, who's going to talk about one of those government plans that's going on that we don't know about, but is characteristic of the problem that we find ourselves in, where our politicians have become salesmen for government plans and government agendas that we are not party to. And our politicians should be standing up and saying, no, they should be giving us a voice. They should be representing the best interests of the people. But in this case, they very definitely aren't. And hopefully you will give Dave Ellis, who is an independent defence analyst, he advises government, he has worked very closely with our Northern Ireland veterans to try and get justice for them, and he has worked with several other members of the House of Lords, advising them on defence issues. So I hope tonight you will hear something really, really interesting from him, something that demonstrates the fact that our government is no longer working for us, it is working for itself. So I would like to bring to the stage David Ellis.
Well, thanks for the promotion on advising government. In the main, most of my support has been to MPs, MEPs, defence press, and senior officers. So I've had quite a bit to do with raising awareness, or at least trying to raise awareness, with something called European Defence and Security Union. So I have had the privilege of actually interviewing Anne, where we were discussing some domestic security issues at the time. But the thrust of the point of this tonight, and I'm going to pick up on what you said there with the politicians saying no. So I'm going to open up with some chronology to what has happened with the way that since Tony Blair initiated the UK involvement into the European defence concept. Now, Tony, at the Munich Defence Conference, when he was discussing this in the context of wider European security, stated that the European defence concept, but I'm going to speak union, defence union, that is what we are talking about. But he said it didn't help the Brexit case if we explained it properly, it being defence union. So the chronology for this subject, so we've got decades of reductions in military capability in this country under both Labour and Conservative governments. To the state now that when the Tories had the baton handed over in 2010, Admiral Sandy Woodward, who was the lead admiral who ran the Falklands campaign, made a significant intervention in the press where he stated that as a result of the Conservative strategic review then, which was baton handed over, table laid up by Blair, that UK militarily we couldn't do anything other than defend either end of the channel. Now please let that sink in. That was 2010, and he was a time-served war veteran. So things have got worse since then, because as we've seen subsequent cuts and subsequent reviews, because the reviews are the part where the government asks our military heads of service, who are not in charge of the military. Our military is run by civil servants now, since Tony Blair. They are invited, under the style of these defence reviews, to engage in cost-saving exercises, which means cuts. Politically to you as the general tax-paying British public, that's a defence cut. And for decades now, the British people have accepted defence cuts. And defence has been an apolitical subject. For too long, it has been too quiet. It has not been in the political arena. And I want to thank the South West Reform, and particularly Gordon and Anne, for the opportunity to speak tonight and offer you some insight into what's been going on. So as our national military has been cut, and we've had a plethora of officers, and it doesn't seem to matter whether they're an admiral or general or whatever, intervene and say we should not be doing this because our adversaries are advancing. Now, at a time when there's war in Europe again, and in the context of this general election, and I'm going to come on to Labour policy in a moment, but first I've got to really explain to you what European Defence and Security Union is, so you understand. It is not, I repeat, not an EU army. It does not exist. It is a fictitious load of nonsense. It's a cul-de-sac politically, it doesn't go anywhere. Now, fortunately, Nigel Farage in GE19 and Anne started to make progress with this subject. because this is the chronology, right? So I'm going to sketch about in time, but please bear with me. In 1984, I'm going to come back to your no, because it's highly relevant. In 1984, Margaret Thatcher was invited by Jacques Delors for three things for the next stage of the ever closer union, which includes defence union, currency union, and the loss of the veto, the reduction in the taking away of the national veto. I'll come back to that because Ursula von der Leyen, who's the current head of the EU, has stated that nations will be losing the veto in defence and security. Now, you may think that we've left the EU, but we have not, I repeat, not fully in terms of defence and security. In the referendum period, there was a significant pushback by some senior officers, headed up by Sir Richard Dearlove, former head of MI6, who were railing against what was actually been happening since the 1984 intervention, where Maggie famously said, no, 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 because Jacques Delors and the EU did not make the destination of the defence union clear. Now, the destination for defence union is now clear, but it is not being precipitated to the general public. And this is our key problem. We cannot fix our national military without fixing procurement and without fixing our industry. The military and the industry go hand in glove. Now, where this relates to defence union is that Ursula has stated in terms that she wants to appoint one single European defence contractor. Thank you. What does that mean for Rolls-Royce, BAE, Babcock, and everybody else, and all the industries that come under that in the next tiers? That is the destination. Now, the military unification, Ursula wants to unify all of the defence and security services in the EU zone. And currently, as it stands, that includes the UK. Because when Blair took us in and initiated the concept, it was hidden in plain view. It was neither, and this you must take this on board, it was neither explained or denied. This was the tactic that was employed all the way through the Blair and Brown period, at the baton handing over to Cameron. Okay? The baton handing over to Cameron, Osborne, and Hammond. There are no votes in defence. And I'm submitting to all you good people that what he really meant was there were no votes in EU defence, but he could not have that conversation because the unification process and the Europeanisation units were already installed in the MOD. So the MOD is no longer a military HQ. It is not capable of running our military in a war. And I've got that from numerous generals, and I'm happy to rely on what they're saying. So, we've got to Blair and Cameron, from the Blair period to Cameron. So where that now pertains to the referendum, defence and security were excluded from the referendum period for both leave and remain. If you remember the gambits, it was take back control of. No mention of defence because we were already part way through, but nobody wanted to have that conversation. It was politically inconvenient because the great British public, I should imagine, would have gone, what? Went very quiet after Margaret Thatcher. The next time somebody said no was in the GE of 19. Do you know who that was? Anne and Nigel said no, along with Sir Richard Dearlove and a lot of other senior officers. Now, where the senior military officers are concerned, in and out of Defence Committee and the lobbies, and I have lobbied both in the Commons and in the Lords, I have not met one yet. Well, there was one. I have met one, and he's an interesting point because it relates to the hiding in plain view. If any of you have any idea who the head of EU military staff was? Because you didn't think the EU had military, did you? The head of EU military staff. This was the period when Nigel Farage was being lambasted by Nick Clegg about, you know, a dangerous fantasy. But unfortunately, they were talking about an EU army, which was not what we're doing. The head of EU military staff, this is years back, Lieutenant General Sir David Leakey. It's one of our officers. He later became Black Rod. Okay, so some context there. So European Defence and Security Union is the unification of all of the defence and security services. So think for Britain what that means, and this is one of the things Dearlove and Co railed against, and he would know because he was head of MI6, is that it would affect our security services, our Five Eyes capability or the intelligence, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, the lot. It even precipitates into coal-face policing. So the problem with the job is there isn't a smoking gun. I can't give you a document or anyone with Defence and Security Union on a page so you can understand it. It is a freight train of bureaucracy as the EU do things. So if you think of coal and steel, fishing, now think military and what that's going to look like. And this appertains to the G now because of what Labour have announced for policy. So this GE couldn't have come at a better time for this because we've just had the D-Day anniversary and the anniversary for the Falklands War. So the just out Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, stated not long ago that defence and security needed to go into the GE debate. And I agree with him. So thank you for reform because we're having the debate. And particularly for Labour and Conservative, that might be uncomfortable. But if they want to have a defence debate, we've got to include these other factors. However uncomfortable they are, we've got to discuss them because there will be a bill. This thing is not for free. So, we've got to look at Defence and Security Unions. Ursula von der Leyen has no military capability whatsoever of her own in the EU. None. She has headquarters, command and control structures, and the EU have built a bureaucratic structure, right? They have built the bureaucracy in order to unify the nation's militaries within Europe. There will be a treaty change very soon, post this GE, which will advance the process. Now, some of you may recall the term the sleeping beauty of Lisbon, which I'm referring to as Defence and Security Union. Right, so there will be a treaty change. So there's quite a lot going on at the moment. But where it appertains to the way Labour and Tory have handled this. So we've had Ben Wallace say we need to talk about defence. Great, Ben, let's do that. Okay, but one thing we do need to talk about is this, because it's not as simple as His Majesty's Armed Forces and NATO, which used to be the cornerstone of our defence. We now have European Defence and Security Union, and the original objections from our senior officers were that these structures duplicated what already existed in NATO and overlapped. So why are we doing that? We've already got that, and NATO works. So that was the original thrust of the campaign back in the referendum, although it was hard to see, but particularly in G19. So if you can imagine that we want this operation to bring all of the military to single point command and control from Brussels. What does that look like? It's a mammoth operation. And the structure has components, they're called pillars. But essentially what we've done during the cat's away, the mice are going to play period under Truss, because crucially, under Boris, the status of this matter was that it was to be considered. And what they did was pause. We were in process under Boris with, we're going to get Brexit done and all that. There was a pause. And critically, when you look at the players that were involved, so Ursula von der Leyen, former German defence minister, now head of the EU. Okay, Lord Frost, our head negotiator at the time, became National Security Advisor. Can you see the defence and security overlap? Right, it wasn't apparent, but it is there. So Tim Barrow, who was Theresa May's wingman for the negotiations where we all railed against, and so we don't, the public didn't want that. Tim Barrow was, for the period just gone, he's been replaced by a military officer now, he was National Security Advisor. So you can see how it's gone within weeks. All of these people have a defence and security portfolio, and they all overlap. So the bit where Theresa May was concerned is she was going to formally take us into Defence and Security Union in a section in the backstop. And there was enough pushback within Whitehall to go, no, because it was very, very, as Lord Frost put it, we don't want that, it's too rigid. I would have loved him to use more descriptive terminology so that the public would have understood what on earth he was talking about, which was effectively, we're not dealing with NATO with this thing, okay? You know, NATO is national militaries and collective defence, all right? And we still do our own, you know, we still have our own command and control structures, but they then transfer into NATO, but we still make our own equipment. EU Defence and Security Union is a completely different beast. It wants it all. Everything. Boots to nukes. And the conversation in Europe is a nuclear-capable Defence and Security Union. Now think about that. Because currently in the Eurozone, there are only 2 countries that have nuclear capability, and that's us and France. So there's a lot to consider with this. So there was the May attempt to take us in formally in a section of the backstop. Boris had a pause. Under Truss, it advanced rapidly in all of that period. We went into one of the key components called PESCO, formal agreement, at which point there was another railback from our old guard saying, no, 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 we don't want to be doing that because you're in one bit of it because of the bureaucratic structure. You're in all of it. That's the way it's done. You know, in the EU text, and the text is everything, they have it all. So where this concerns for the now with Labour. Labour have made an announcement today, and there's been a burst in the press from Grant Shapps and former Tory Defence Minister Liam Fox questioning their policy. Their policy is this, and it is formally in their manifesto on page 119, which is Labour will seek a defence pact with the EU. Now, the EU are offering no one in the EU zone a pact. They are offering only military and security unification. So, you know, ever closer union, unify, unification. We are not dealing with a pact. That's not what it is at all. So we're at a point now where, thank you for Grant Shapps finally opening up this crucible where we can have a debate about this, because the public need to know what the destinations and what Labour are proposing in this policy. So they need to explain, or they need to deny. They can't have this silence, which is what we've had now since Margaret Thatcher in 1984. Because if you care about our military, and if you care about our sovereignty, you cannot have sovereignty without sovereignty in defence. I would submit to you all that there is no sovereignty at all without. None. So, where we are with Labour with this, anybody voting Labour needs to understand that the destination of what they're talking about isn't a pact. I would submit that that is disingenuous at the least, because that's not what Ursula is talking about. When Ursula stated she wanted one single point command and control and one single EU defence contractor, she later elaborated that she did not want countries making things in corners, I quote. Let that sink in. Ursula, former German defence minister, now head of the EU, who is pushing through this agenda of military unification, does not want countries making defence platforms or arms on their own. Now, if we are to fix our military, and I say we as a country, if we are to fix it, we have to fix procurement. Now, are Labour suggesting that the EU will fix our military and our procurement? Because if they are, they need to explain what that is. Because otherwise, we're going to end up in a situation, and interestingly, you know, although the Tories for the last so long have been laying the table up, so did Labour before them. But you need to bear one thing in mind. Tony Blair, when he was at that Munich Defence Conference, and he sort of touched this subject, stated that as far as he was concerned, although the transatlantic NATO alliance was important and we needed to maintain it, it was essential, I quote, essential that the EU proceeded with this defence union. And we, and when he said we, he meant the EU, not the UK, had their own defence capabilities. Now, if you wanted to go back a generation and talk to the generation in 1972, Anne, trading bloc, we will now very soon be looking at a fully armed state. You cannot have political union without military union, because the policy from foreign policy will dictate what will happen in defence and security. And that will impact the UK, because if Labour go in, they are committing to the attachments within the defence structures, which commit to the unification process. And as I've submitted to you, the destination is single point command and control. So that's Ursula and the people, their other fellow head in the EU, will be telling everyone to jump to. Now, she's already stated she wants this thing to be able to muster and stand to in 2024, and that's on the record. We're in 2024 and we're having a GE, and there's war in Europe. Ursula has stated she is happy to be a wartime PM. Ursula has requested that the EU put the defence industry in Europe on a war footing. What does that mean for the UK? So when Ben Wallace said in his intervention about he wanted defence and security to come into the GE, he also said this: Britain is being challenged at every level. What do you think he meant by that, ladies and gentlemen? Indeed so. So the pitch from Keir Starmer really ought not to be about how it's all going to be jammed tomorrow. And we've seen a lot of bluster, and I think Anne is wonderful in distillation of don't look at the bluster, because we've seen a lot of bluster about they're going to be increased defence spending, 2.5%, what is percentage? The reality is that has not happened under the Conservative administration. We have seen more cuts. And our heads of services have stated that as far as they're concerned, defence has been under-resourced for decades. Now, I sat in Defence Committee, and I'm going to give you a couple of references only. General Sir Richard Barrons, and I was sat behind him at the time, stated in 2018 in front of all the Parliamentary Select Committee that the British Army was not fit for purpose, and it would not be able to fight the war. Not with the Tier 1 part, but not with the Tier 1 officer. Then we have Admiral Sir George Zambalis, who was the first Sea Lord at the time. He was just out as being First Sea Lord. He said he was, as First Sea Lord, he would, because this is anybody here in the Royal Navy, put your ears up, please. As First Sea Lord, he would ideally like a number of submarines, that's nuclear, that was not 0 or 1. Now think about it, that was 2018. We've just had the head of the American Army come over and tell us we're not very happy about your ammo and your situation. So anecdotally, from my sources, all senior officers are saying to me that we currently have, at best, a week's ammunition. Now I'd like to show of hands, a little bit of interaction at this point. How many of you are satisfied and content with the status of His Majesty's Armed Forces as it stands now? Are you content? No. Are you happy? No. Do you think Ursula is going to fix this problem? No. Is that responsibility that of His Majesty's government? I should think so. So, really, this is obviously may have come to as a shock to some of you. It's a subject that's been off the agenda. It's been apolitical for far too long, and the gloves need to come off, and it needs to come out into the public arena because it's a very remote subject because we've got war in Europe. But I would rather that the great British public knew the truth of the matter, and then they could put on the armour of the truth and deal with it. But at the moment, that's not happening. And both of the party leaders are responsible because we've got opposition. We've been opposition for long enough in Rishi. There's been Chancellor. And it was anecdotally put to me from a friend of our current Chief of Defence Staff, and I'm happy to rely on the source because he's a very senior officer, that a year ago our heads of service went into Rishi and said to him, we need this, this, and this, and this, and this, and we need it now in order to protect the country against a portfolio of threat from our adversary. And you know who that is. Because currently we cannot defend against it. Rishi dismissed our heads of service and our Chief of Defence Staff, and I quote, I do not believe you. Now, when you get to the stage, you are dismissing your senior officers, refusing to fund them, refusing to listen to what they're saying, and we are at war in Europe. We are heading towards a perilous situation where the thresholds are all going the wrong way. So the policy at the moment for our military, as it stands, and it will potentially alter with Labour, and they want to have a review. And of course, as I've said, the reviews are where all the dirty work happens. All right? We've already got, the reviews are where the heads of service are invited to make savings. Now, that's what Labour are proposing. They want to come in and have a review. I should suggest that's academic, surely. We don't need a review. We just need to get on with fixing it. But anecdotally, the heads of service have said that we cannot really go on like this. Our military is in a perilous state, and it needs to be fixed. And it's really our government that needs to fix it, not the EU. And I don't think that we want to be in a situation where we're subordinate to the EU, and they're making the decisions and literally calling the shots. So when Ursula said she wanted her industry, the European defence industry, to be on a war footing, it was to do with the ammunition for the Ukraine war. That's how it started, and it leveraged it. It's gone further from that. It's gone from 155mm shells to missiles and carrying on. We've got people in Europe now talking they want a missile shield, an EU missile shield. So I'm going to conclude really with a couple of Churchill quotes because I think it's rather apt. Churchill said that the difference between socialism and communism was not one of theory or principle, it was one of method. And if we carried on with socialism, we would end up with political police and a civil service that was neither civil or servant. And ladies and gentlemen, we're at that point now. We're at that inflection. Yes. Thank you. The speeches that really our political leaders ought to be having with us at this time now is that they can promise us nothing but blood, sweat, toil and tears, because that is the future of what we're looking at in Europe if this situation isn't dealt with. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I just want to ask a question. Who trusts a Labour government or a Conservative government or a Liberal Democrat government or a Green government to fix any of that? Do you trust a Reform government with a leader in Nigel Farage and a supporter who have already called themselves, who are already entertaining the expertise? There is only really one way to vote in a general election. It is to vote Reform. Now, just briefly, I just want to ask if there is a question for David before we have a little break for a drink. Yes. So, if you'd like to stand up, shout.
I want to wonder, we know about these chaps that are visiting us free, and they're often put up in hotels some of them 400 or 500 after battalions were. I'd like to know your views on what the possibility of the style of army, certainly in the same particular people could be. I mean, we have to understand that the countries are really serious countries. They're probably able and capable of stripping AK-47s and using them. What are the chances of them standing up behind us and taking serious damage?
It would probably be better to come at it from the context of national security, and that I would submit what national security. Really, as it stands, and the majority of our old guard view it as that the current National Security Council is providing merely an illusion of national security. So we don't control our offshore zone, and we do not have a safe and secure maritime border. And I'm quoting Rear Admiral Chris Parry on that. So the national security issue really goes across the whole estate of the country, from food to energy to military and so on and so forth. So I hope that answers your question, if you can read between the lines. Another question? Matt? Well, policy-wise, you know, the Tory party was moved in 2010 by Letwin and Cameron and Osborne to socialism. So I think that's nonsense, really. There is no difference. There is no difference, really. There's a margin, a tiny margin. There's a few Conservative MPs that still want to be doing Conservative things, but they're not in the cabinet and they're in the minority. So, you know, a vote, really, you could argue that one the other way around. So a vote for Conservative was a vote for Labour anyway, because they were socialist policy.
Are our armed services and forces in such a bad state because we've sent everything to Ukraine?
No, it's a more complicated problem than that. It's decades of under-resourcing, and it's running things down to such a degree where there is no stock, there is no resilience, and probably it's best to view it in this fashion. So a former Admiral has only just recently put it to me, and I think he summed it up very well, that 14 years of the Conservative government, and they have failed to deliver a military that is either capable of intervening or being a reserve-backed deterrent force, which is currently how the government policy is. It's a deterrent force. So the Ukrainian issue is a separate to that, because it's a beyond, it's another conversation. But the point is our magazines were at their lowest, and the adversaries could see the depths of our magazines. That's the point. Another question? Yes, ma'am.
So there's 300 people in this room, and you've just told us a story that I suspect that most people like me had not fully understood, that the EU has a strategy, and Ursula von der Leyen, and I won't tell you what I think about her, but to be polite, how can this message get to a wider audience? This needs to be on national television.
Indeed so my involvement with this subject matter started in the referendum campaign. I've been lobbying with a UK security company in order to try and retain the Hercules aircraft. And it was very clear to me from somebody from business and engineering, so I'm an engineer by trade, I'm not military. So my background is business and engineering. It was blatantly apparent that there was something catastrophically wrong with what was going on, and this could not be allowed to go on. And I tried incredibly hard, along with some senior officers who were activated in the referendum campaign, by a spectacular event. And that was an accidental email that I received from General Sir David Richards, where Number 10 had fabricated a letter with a dozen very senior officers' names on it, without consulting them, taking their names in vain, supporting staying in the EU. And that was the beginning of what I wanted to be an exposure period for this subject matter. But what we found was And that was backed up by Lord Tevitt, with all of the referencing I've given you today to do with Margaret Thatcher. It's come from Lord Tevitt, bless him. And it also come from Admiral Mike Boyce, who was former Chief of Defence Staff, who told me in the referendum period where we wanted on the Leave and Remain agenda the defence conversation, because also you would have assumed Remain would want to put Defence Union on because it was happening. And you would have assumed that Leave would have wanted to put it on the agenda because they would not have wanted to do it. But what we found was nobbling after nobbling after nobbling, and trying to push this through has been incredibly difficult to get the public awareness, because we have not had statespersons from either of the parties that are prepared to really have a grown-up debate about defence and security and include all of the factors. So, as I've said to you, the factors are our national force, His Majesty's Armed Services, NATO, but the bit they've always left out has been European Defence and Security Union. It's been as if it's been expunged. But we're going to see it now with a Labour government. And the question is, what are they going to do with it? I agree with you entirely, man, but please take it from me as somebody that's lobbied in Parliament, had a lot to do with the press and political figures. And Anne and Nigel, if he was here, would back me up as to just how difficult it's been in order to have an awareness campaign in education. You make your own mind up whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. But as I've said, I've yet to find a military officer, apart from David Lincoln, that thinks it's a good idea or that it would work. And if it did work, in what time frame would it work? Another question? Sam?
Hang on. I'll come out with the microphone. Everyone wants to hear. It's all right, you shouting it out, but everyone wants to hear. It's like Angelica. We're probably all old enough to remember that, aren't we?
I'm an ex-military man. I've done my time in war and places like that. So I understand the structure and basic operating of NATO. Why has, for example, the General Secretary of NATO not brought this issue to the fore to our government or to our people? Because, NATO, we have relied on peace and stability in Europe and the Northern Hemisphere since the end of 1949.
That's correct. That's a superb, it's a superb question. So currently as it stands, as I've said to you, the government has committed, and there'll be a transfer of undertakings to go into PESCO, which is a key component of European defence and security and military mobility. But they have classified the details of that arrangement. We are not allowed to see them. So the government has said, at the moment, even if you FOI'd it, it's classified. So there's your stop to it, because they've designated it. So it doesn't leave us a lot of room to sort of proceed from that, other than, we need to challenge it and say, well, that's not correct. Where the NATO factor is concerned, so Ursula, as far as her and the EU are concerned, Britain is engaged formally in multiple bilateral and multilateral defence agreements across the EU. One of the big tipping points post the referendum was we went into something called E3 and E12. So E, European, E3, which is Britain, France and Germany. We're in a multilateral agreement. And then there was E12, which was signed by Earl Howe, the Tory Defence Minister. And that was post the referendum. Now, Ursula considers that those bilateral and multilateral defence agreements and NATO will form part of European Defence and Security Union. She's laying claim to it. Now, NATO is the trusted brand, I would submit. So we've got a problem there, because the original arguments from all of our experienced officers and practitioners with expertise all said that that was a no-no, and that wasn't any good. I would suggest that was to do with reaction timescales of mobilising when there was a problem. We'll take one more question. Yes, ma'am.
Good.
I don't know if this is stupid, but I'm going to say it anyway. Vladimir Putin keeps provoking us constantly. How close to reality are his provocative comments about attacking us?
So let us be under no illusion. You can like it or you can lump it, and I suggest we need to have a debate properly, a national debate on this situation. But Colonel Putin, former KGB, has made it patently clear to the Westphalian Order, UK, Washington, everyone, that he is at war. And there are lessons of battle and there are lessons of war. Militaries fight battles, countries fight wars. And I would submit that when Ben Wallace said, bearing in mind it's been read in, we know that Rishi does not want to be a wartime PM. All right, that's been submitted to our senior officer. All right, does not want to be a wartime PM. You make your own judgment on where that sits at the moment and what this lady has just said. So we are being challenged at every level. That's Ben Wallace, I quote. You can read into that what you think that really actually means. But sooner or later, we're going to have to face up to the reality that the Keir Starmer government and Keir Starmer may be a wartime PM. And I want you to think about what that's going to look like. Yes. Thank you.
So I was hoping we could have a brief break now, maybe if you want a little drink, and prepare ourselves for our keynote speaker in 5 to 10 minutes or so.
So,
In the comments, do you want to just put on there for just vaccine? Comments for vaccine. Just in case someone like is watching it wants what person. Everyone David Ellis.
That's good like that. A bit too loud. Okay, it's 8:15. We're going to move forward in a minute. Just if you charge your glasses, take your seats. We'll move forward and we'll go back to the wonderful Gordon Scott. You having a good night? Are you learning? Are you feeling motivated? Yeah, me too. It's great, isn't it? Thank you for coming. It's really, really good. Okay. So the general message is, if you want change, you've got to vote for it. Not only you, you've got to tell your friends to vote for it as well. You're the best adverts here. You've listened to this tonight. It's been really informative, and there's a lot of stuff to take away. You now need to go and tell 3 of your friends, because that's how we can make this happen. Gordon's a good guy. We're going to invite him back up on the stage in a minute. Have you had a nice night so far? Yeah. Are we excited to get Anne up here? Yeah. Me too. Okay. Welcome back to the stage, please, Mr. Gordon Scott.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much to David to come and give us that message. That was fantastic. The key takeaway for me, on a basic level, is that completely and utterly demonstrates that our government has been let loose and it's just doing what it wants. It doesn't care about you. It's not thinking about you, and it's not representing you. We have a chance in 2.5 weeks to vote in proper representatives of the people. People who will give you a voice and will say to the government on the other side of that debate, no, this isn't in the best interests of the people, so we're going to vote against it, because that is what parliamentary democracy is about, and it's not working. Okay, I realise that I didn't say much about myself in the first little bit, so I will introduce myself a little bit more so that you know who I am. I'm a proud father of 2 young children and a proud husband. We actually live in Newton Abbot, but we have strong ties to the Bay as we come to church in the Bay for several years now. So when the opportunity came for reform, it was natural for me to stand up for TORBAY as opposed to where I live, because my connections with the community there really just weren't as strong. In terms of my background, I am currently an investment manager working in Exeter, but I have actually quite a varied background before that. I've always been brought up in the southwest. I've lived in all 4 counties: Somerset, Dorset, Devon and Cornwall. And because of that, as I grew up working in restaurants and hotels, as we do in Torquay. You know, that's our bread and butter. And I've had a strong relationship with the sea. My very first job was at a sailing school when I was 10 years old, and I've kept that all the way through. I was a dinghy instructor, and then after a false start where I silly thought doing accountancy in London would be a fantastic career, I decided to go sailing again. And that was after a history degree. So history, accountancy, that doesn't work. And then I went sailing. And I took the opportunity, and I instructed not at dinghy level, but at a sailing yacht level. One thing came to another, and I started cruising around the place on the boat that I was teaching on. And one day, someone from the super yachting industry had a mishap on the boat, and unfortunately, this man had hurt himself, and they needed a crew member. And so I jumped on one of these super yachts, and it was in the Caribbean, and I then cruised around the Caribbean and the east coast of the United States for the following few years, and met my beautiful wife. All of that was in the service industry, which I think is quite pertinent to what we are doing here and what a politician is meant to be, what an MP is meant to be. An MP is meant to serve you. And I believe that experience in the service industry, whether it be at hotel level or restaurant level, growing up and through university, or indeed on the sailing boats, where very often I was the sole person on there with 4 or 5 crew, and I had to look after them and serve them and take responsibility for them. I believe that is a really, really good foundation for now coming and serving the people of TORBAY. So, I think I've covered just about everything I need to cover on that, apart from maybe the history. The history is a really key component of it. Studying history, as I did, was within medieval history. You get to know a lot about this country. And this country has been a beacon of freedom in the world, and it has been a beacon of freedom in this world since its inception. And its inception, you can argue about when it's happened, but probably I'm talking about the exodus of the Romans, maybe 300 AD. Christianity had become the key religion in the Western Empire, and because of that, we were introduced to the rule of law through that Christianity, and that's progressed right the way through. Let's do it very quickly. Scoot forward to Magna Carta. Magna Carta, we had the king submitting to the rule of law. I spoke about that earlier. And then in the Bill of Rights in 1688, we had the king and Parliament submit to the rule of law. So unless we know our history, we can't reinstitute this country and the freedoms that go with it. We need to understand that our government needs to submit to the rule of law and needs to be equal under it with us. We need to do that again because they've gone crazy. They're just doing what they want. So we need a new set of representatives. Those representatives are spread out across the country, and they're now campaigning for the Reform Party with an organic underlying movement of volunteers that are pushing us to a new reformation, where we reinstitute the rule of law in this country and give it back its freedom.
Yes.
On that note, I think it's my pleasure to introduce someone who has done it all before and has been fighting for our freedoms now for many, many years, and she has had a formative part in this Reform Party. I would like to introduce you to Anne Widdecombe. Anne Widdecombe.
Right, are we going to win? Yes! That wasn't too bad. But that's not going to get us over the line. So I'm going to try again. Are we going to win? Yes! That's right. That, as I said in Brixham a couple of days ago, is the level of energy that we've got to maintain if we are going to take Parliament by storm on July the 4th. Now, okay, we're not going to go from naught to government. That isn't going to happen. I believe in telling the electorate the truth. We're not going to go from naught to government. We can go from naught to opposition. And this country is going to need very badly an effective opposition after July the 4th, when we have got Starmageddon in control. What do we want from an opposition? Well, first of all, we want common sense. Yeah. We are the only party offering the people common sense. For example, let's take an obvious one. We all know that the health service is under strain. We all know that. We all know that there aren't enough doctors. And so what has the Conservative government been doing? It has been keeping a cap on the numbers of medical students. So we need more doctors, but we're going to cap the numbers training. Where is the sense in that? Reform will remove the cap altogether. And we'll go way beyond that, because we know that not only do we have a problem of finding enough doctors, but there is also a major problem of keeping enough doctors. So we will say, and do say, that under our policies, if you spend 10 years working for the NHS after you have qualified, we will remit every penny of the student debt that you have incurred. Common sense says that if you want people to do something, you have to offer them an incentive. And that is what we will do. And we will offer an incentive to all frontline health workers, not the target setters, not the form fillers. I'm talking about the frontline find the patient-facing health workers, we will offer all of them, providing they stay in the NHS, 3 years tax-free.
Wow.
Yeah. If you want to get rid of your taxes, first of all, vote reform and then join the health service. Now, where is the common sense in saying that when we have got thousands of people arriving illegally in this country, coming here daily almost, where is the common sense in saying, well, we're going to let that happen while we pursue a plan to have them all dealt with in Rwanda? Where is the sense in that? Rwanda's fine. If the government had got Rwanda off the ground, that would have been fine. I wouldn't have objected. But where was the sense in never having a plan B? And Rishi didn't have a plan B. He talked endlessly about Rwanda. He was still talking about Rwanda when we came into the general election. But he did nothing as a fallback. And the consequence of that is that we have huge numbers of people in this country who do not have the legal right to be here, but who do take up health services, housing, all the rest of it that all of us take up, they also take up and use. So, common sense. And that is what we are offering the British people when it comes to woke. Keir Starmer doesn't know what a woman is. He thinks that 10% of them have a male appendage. Where is the sense in that? Where is the sense in teaching our children that there are 142 different genders? Where is the sense in not allowing parents to have a say over what their children are being taught? Where is the sense in letting Europe determine our defence policies? Where is the sense in turning our backs on NATO, who have kept the peace in Europe ever since the Second World War? Where is the sense of that? And where particularly is the sense of doing it when at the moment that peace has been threatened for the first time with the invasion of Ukraine? Where is the sense in wanting to compete with other countries and yet putting up business taxes? First thing Rishi Sunak did, first thing he did was to put up corporation tax to the same level as France. So what happens? Firms like AstraZeneca go to the Irish Republic because they have lower corporation tax. If we want Britain to be competitive, if we want to attract businesses, if we want to attract investment and thereby build employment, if we want to do all of that, then we need to be competitive, not prohibitive. Where is the sense in saying to people, oh, we're going to cut the level of tax that you pay, but by the way, you won't notice because we're going to freeze the thresholds? Where is it? So we stand for common sense. We will stop the votes, and we will stop the votes. We will stop the votes in the obvious way. We'll turn them back. Before anybody says that can't be done, A, it is perfectly permissible in international law. B, Australia did it. And C, Belgium did it. If they can turn boats round, why can't we? It is inevitable that some will get through because there's no such thing as a perfect system. So when people do succeed in coming here unlawfully, then we will house them in secure reception centres, not in hotels. You might ask yourself, why do they all come to Britain anyway? Why do they want to come to Britain? Why do they come to Britain? They're in a safe country, they're in France. France is under the rule of law. France is a signatory to all the conventions that we're a signatory to. There's nothing unsafe about France. They're in a safe country. Why risk a perilous sea journey and pay a sweet fortune to the people smugglers for the privilege? Why do all of that? And the answer is because we are the easiest country in the West in which to disappear. We don't have national identity cards. We don't have secure reception routinely practiced. We don't do any of that. But we do have a very flourishing underground economy. And we do have a lot of people scattered in hotels up and down the country. And when they're about to be refused, we can't find them. After you, at the moment, if you found them, you couldn't do anything because you haven't got any mechanism for sending them back. We can't find them. And that, therefore, the message goes out. If you come to Britain with a false or a flimsy claim, as long as you can get in the first place, you'll never have to leave. And very, very few do leave. And we're only going to deter people from making that perilous journey. We'll only deter them from doing that if they know that their stay here will be extremely short and that they will be returned once they can. That's just plain common sense. It is common sense to say when it comes to legal migration, it is common sense to say, of course we want people who have medical skills, who will go into the caring professions, who will do all of that. But we don't want people coming here just for the purpose of reading Mickey Mouse degrees in so-called universities and bringing their dependents with them. There is no sense in that. So what we're offering is a return to what we once took for granted in this country, starting with freedom of speech.
Yes.
We used to have a freedom of speech and a liberty of expression which was the envy of the world. You think of our history. Immediately after the Second World War, when people had lost husbands, sons, brothers, families, life, limb to the Nazis, we still had in this country a British Union of fascists. And they were allowed to put their point of view. They weren't during the war, but after the war. Now why? We know that people would have been not just offended by that, but massively, massively hurt. But we allowed it. And why? Because Britain was a bastion of free speech. Move forward a decade or so. And we were in the height of the Cold War. With the weapons, we forget this now, the SS-20s lined up on the borders of the Warsaw Pact countries, pointing straight at us. Our businessmen were being arrested and claimed to be spies. We actually were in a Cold War. And yet, you could stand for Parliament in this country as a communist. You wouldn't get in, but you could stand as a communist. You could sell the Morning Star on street corners. There was a British Communist Party. And yes, that would offend and hurt people as well, but we allowed it because we believed in free speech. Now, if we allowed things of that order of magnitude, how come that now it only takes one person to say that a street preacher has offended them for that person to be arrested? And you don't have to prove that he did offend them. You don't have to prove that he said something discriminatory. You don't have to prove that he exhibited hatred. It is enough to say that the person making the complaint perceived that he was doing something. What sort of law is that? That's not law. That is oppression. Yes. So we will go for free speech. And we will make sure. I might hate what somebody else is saying, but I will defend their right to say it. Yeah. Only so long as they do not deliberately set out to incite violence. Yes. That is what always used to be the limitation on free speech. But now the limitation is somebody is offended. Well, nobody's got any God-given right to go through this life without being offended. I'm offended every day. That's several times every day. So, that's the first thing, freedom of speech. The second thing is freedom to grow. Freedom to grow economically. As I said earlier, if we want to promote employment, we want to promote a wealthy country, we want to meet the housing targets, which we need to meet, we want to have a health service which actually works, then we've got to have the money to do all those things. And governments don't make money. People make the money. It is the people who create the wealth in this country. And they must be free to do so and encouraged to do so. They must be given the necessary incentives. We must take low taxes, not high taxes. That is absolutely crucial. But then there is another sort of freedom. We've heard a bit about it tonight already. The freedom to believe that whatever else happens, our country is safe. And that whatever else may be going wrong, our country is safe. That is what we need to just take almost for granted. Well, now, the very opposite of that is true. We are not safe. We do not have the military capacity which we actually need. We don't have the ships. We don't have the aircraft. We don't have the men. We simply do not have it in sufficient quantities. And that is something else that it is crucial that we address, and which Reform has said that it will address and raise the amount that we are spending on our armed services, make sure that we support NATO and not the European Defence Union. So all those policies are what people want. And what we've got to do, therefore, is to make sure that people know what we're offering them. Now, I'm tired of hearing that a vote for reform is a vote for Starmer. A vote for reform is a vote for reform. It isn't reform that has put Starmer as far ahead as he is. It is the Conservatives who have administered this country, in inverted commas, administered this country, for the last 14 years, and particularly for the last 4.5. They are the ones who have guaranteed Starmer a victory, because they backbite, they panic, they defenestrate their leaders. I roared with laughter at the weekend. There, lo and behold, was a big article in the Mail on Sunday, which said that anybody who voted reform was putting Starmer in power. Then you turned the page, and the very next page gave an expose of how Conservative MPs are even now, in the middle of a general election campaign, plotting who to put in Rishi Sunak's place on. It was there on the very next page. I wondered if the editor had read the 2 pages and made any concession. So it isn't Starmer who's winning. It's Schooner who's given it to him. Given it to him on a plate. And our job is to make sure that we have a real opposition. And there are several ways of doing that. One is to win enough seats to be a parliamentary force. As I've said, honestly, we're not going to be the government. We can be a parliamentary force. The second way is simply to say to whatever Conservative rump remains after this election, if you don't do business with us and you don't give the people the common sense policies they want, we'll do it again. That is another form of power. So whatever happens, it is never a wasted vote if you put your cross by reform. Never. Only 2.5 weeks ago. Now already we've overtaken the Conservatives in one poll, and already we've done very well. Already we've shifted the predictions, the experts. They began this election by saying that we were going to get so many votes but no seats. Now they're saying, well, we're going to get so many votes but 7 seats. Give it another 2.5 weeks, we'll be on 50 seats. Yeah. So, 2.5 weeks to go, folks, and then it's done. We can't do anything after 10 o'clock on July the 4th. So everything we do has got to be done between now and then. First of all of you, absolutely every one of you in this room who's voting reform, I don't know if there's anybody who's not, but they may be feeling a trifle out of place by now. Any of you who are voting reform, or any of you who are thinking about voting reform, talk to other people. Now, we're well past the stage where people said, I've never heard of reform. But we are not well past the stage where people say, I'm not entirely sure what you stand for. Make sure that everybody knows what we stand for. And that will do a power of good. And as I always say to people, make sure that every single day of your life, every single day, at least between now and July the 4th, you talk to somebody about reform. Somebody at work, somebody casually that you're chatting to in the pub, member of the family who's phoned up, whatever it may be, talk about reform. And if you can't talk to people, put a leaflet through their door every single day. And if every single day we do something which puts the reform message out there, the accumulative effect will be more seats in Parliament. And that's what we go for. And particularly anybody who says, oh, I'd like to vote reform, I really would, but might put Starmer in. Starmer's going to be in anyway. No doubt about that at all. And frankly, it doesn't make much difference once the party's got a big majority, whether it's got a big majority or a very big majority. And there is no suggestion that Starmer's only get a tiny majority. He's going to get a big one. So that's done. That's a given. What matters is who is then going to fight him? Who is going to provide real opposition? What army is going to be united against him? That ain't the Conservatives. That is what we have to aim at now. That we will be that united, purposeful, common sense opposition. That is what we have now to achieve. We can achieve it. We can only achieve it if every single one of you go out here and do something towards achieving it. I mean, I'd like to think you leaflet 1,000 houses, but if that's ambitious, at least leaflet your own street. Because that helps. That gets things across. So, folks, thank you very much for inviting me here. I am going to take a few questions in a moment. Thank you very much for inviting me here tonight. And thank you more than that for what you're doing for reform. If there are any doubters in the room, who would like to talk to me afterwards, I'd be very, very happy to do so. And don't worry, I'll be perfectly polite about it. But meanwhile, go forth and prepare for opposition.
Has anyone got any questions? Sometimes controversial, but always honest. I'm Widdecombe. Anyone got any questions? Got a gentleman here? You okay? I'm going to hand you the microphone.
Identity cards. Any person, bring them in.
There is no proposal on part of the reform to introduce national identity cards because we have other plans which will probably obviate the need for them. But having said that, I have never been opposed to national identity cards. And the interesting thing is that every single Home Secretary who's ever come into office against national identity cards leaves office in favour, because they are actually quite useful. But as I say, we've got other policies, so don't worry, that is not on our list.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go to this gentleman.
Just one question about taking the illegal people back to France. Will they accept them?
Well, they won't have any choice. Saying go back through French waters. You know, you can't leave French waters. They're already in France. That's what we've got to stop them doing, is entering British waters.
Yes, here, here.
We don't.
Hi, I've got two questions really. I've recently read Liz Truss's book. Deep State is very real. Even she refers to it twice in the book. How are you going to fight the civil servants who are passionately opposed to Brexit? How are you going to deal with them? And the other question is, I understand that Reform is supporting fracking. And I would invite you to look at the policies, because there's no point in reducing our gas and electricity bill if our water bills go through the roof.
I agree with that one, but I believe we need to be self-sufficient in energy. If we are not.
Right.
And therefore I think we need to consider nuclear, which is clean, and we need to consider using the resources which we've still got in the North Sea, and we need to consider fracking. We need to consider all of this, and we need to work out the way that we maximise our self-sufficiency in energy in the shortest space of time. And just let me say something about net zero. Where's the common sense? We built under 1% of carbon emissions into the world's atmosphere. Under 1%. China, India, Indonesia, 25%. The United States, ours is less than 1%. And to cause our citizens endless expense with new boilers, electric cars, all the other things that we're now trying to impose, or that the current government has been trying to impose, in the name of 1%, while those other countries pollute the atmosphere, seemingly without restraint, is a bit like throwing a sugar cube into Loch Ness and saying, oh, look, I've sweetened the waters. Worrying about our 1% when they've got down to 1%. Sorry, look, the rest of the energy nasty one. Sorry?
Deep state.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I too have read Liz Truss's book, and I recommend it to you all. I didn't think I was going to enjoy it, but it kept me up for a long time. I really did. And she has titled that book, 10 Years to Save the West. And I don't think it's too much of an exaggeration, a little bit maybe, but not too much. Now, I am very clear, reform is very clear, that government does the governing. The British government does the governing. We don't take orders from the World Economic Forum. We don't take orders from the World Council. And we don't have our work stopped by quangos. Government should govern. The British government should govern Britain. And that's very simple as far as the civil servants are concerned, because their job is to serve the government. And that definition hasn't changed. And if you get people who will not serve the government, then it's very straightforward. You ask them to go and do something else.
I'm just interested in why Reform Party might not be called the Common Sense Party members. It's stood out there and seems such a clear message that's so easy to understand. And I just feel that if many more of the population could hear this message of common sense, what an immense support, how that would sell the party.
Well, it's too late to rename the party. But yes, I agree with you. It's a very simple message. Now, long before its time came, William Hague called his manifesto the Common Sense Revolution. And I believe that would have tremendous impact today. It didn't then because nobody really believed how bad it was going to get. But he had things like, well, teachers should be teaching, not filling in forms. Nurses should be nursing. Policemen should be out on the streets policing. This was what he called the common sense revolution. And I believe, actually, since they've poached Armageddon from us, we can poach the common sense revolution from them. And we can talk about it.
And you've mentioned an awful lot of things that you're going to do.
Yep.
How will you fund any of these things?
Well, we've published our manifesto today. We don't call it a manifesto, we call it our contract with the people. But everybody else will inevitably refer to it as a manifesto. It's a bit like when we lost the fight to call the poll tax the community charge. And everybody said, yes, okay, but we called it the poll tax anyway. So everybody's going to call this our manifesto. And today, we have actually published the costings and where we're going to get it from. And they are all fully funded in the terms that if you add up what we're going to do and you add up where we're going to get the money from, it's paid. Now, it's very complicated where we're getting the bulk of that money from. But in essence, it works like this. Governments printed money, it's called quantitative easing. Governments printed money during the COVID disaster. Lots of money. And what? Because they have trillions to make. And what they actually did was, instead of themselves issuing the bonds and taking interest, they got the banks to issue the bonds, and the banks then charged them interest. So it's a bit like, Richard Tice put this rather well, he said it's a bit like handing somebody a fiver and then saying, and how much interest should I be paying? But it's complicated, it's not going to be an easy one to explain, but in case somebody says, as they're already trying to do, this won't work, Switzerland's done it, and the EU Bank has done it. It can be done, and we will do it, and that will give us billions.
Any more? Can we give Anne a massive heavy round of applause? The one thing we are certainly hoping
And on July the 5th, we are going to be one great big boil on the backside of your garden. And we are the boil and our bacon is and love. Thank you. I just
want to give a final call to action. So, I mean, I am actually overwhelmed by the turnout tonight. It's been absolutely fantastic. But tonight we haven't been able to do any of the operational issues to do with the campaign. So tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, we will be back in here in the room just the other side of the bar, where our volunteers will be meeting. We've been meeting here for weeks now, and I would like to kindly invite as many people as possible to come along and see how they can help. Give out leaflets, put up boards, knock on doors. And also the other thing that we need to do, and we need to bear in mind, is that this movement is not funded by big business, by oligarchs, who put money into the top of the party. This is a grassroots movement. We don't receive central funds. This movement depends on your kind donations. So this evening there will be a collection, and I encourage you to give generously, because this is how we were able to rent this room, how we were able to buy these banners, put up the house boards, fund the leaflets. So I encourage you to do that. And I also encourage you to go away and, as Anne said, to bring other people into this movement, to bring other people into our meeting tomorrow night, to tell them that there is something positive they can do to get their country back. So I'd like you to go away tonight and think about that, and I would really love to see as many of you as possible tomorrow evening in here in the other room, and let's hear about how we're going to win TORBAY.